I was actually watching Netflix with my daughter. She's 13, last week or the week before. And we were watching The Office on Netflix, which is great because she wasn't old enough to watch that or wouldn't remember. I think it started before she was born. So we're kind of like reliving that, and I get to share that with her. And it was the episode where Michael Scott is actually getting his Netflix DVDs delivered to the office and watching them a piece at a time, and it's the one where he didn't know Meryl Streep was the bad person in Devil Wears Prada. Anyway, it was that episode, so I had to do the dad thing. I don't know if you're a dad, you understand, or a mom. I kind of like paused it, and I said, in the olden days, Netflix used to actually deliver DVDs to your house, and you would watch them and then send them back, and they would send you another, and that was considered amazing because you didn't have to go to the video store. And of course, she was completely unimpressed with that and kind of said, that's awesome or stupid or whatever, or just rolled her eyes. But anyway, I was realizing as we were talking about that, like, it is so easy as humans to be completely underwhelmed by really amazing things, right? Like, you probably haven't spent any time this week going, man, Netflix is like wizardry, but it is, right? Like, think about like even, and I'm not talking about going back to like 1954. I'm talking about going back to like 1998 and just telling 1998 you, like, number one, that mullet looks weird, but 1998 you, I think I was spiky hair phase. That was not mullet. 1988 Don was mullet. But anyway, like 1998 Don just going back and going, someday there won't be a must-see TV night where Seinfeld and Friends are on. Like, you'll be able to watch this crap anytime you want. It'll be like wizardry, like, and you wouldn't have believed it if you would have told yourself that in 1998 or 1997. Now, I say that because I say this, because I realize, like, we just have this propensity not only to be completely underwhelmed by pretty amazing things, but also we have this ability to just sort of focus on the negative. At least I know I do. Like, as much as I'm here telling you that Netflix is amazing, I get really angry if it buffers for more than like 12 seconds, like not even that long. I'm like, what is this, like the olden days? Like, it's at 25% for like 2 seconds. I can't watch TV like this. I mean, isn't it weird? And then once in a while, this happens at our house. I don't know if you've got a smart TV or like an Amazon Fire Box or something. Once in a while, it'll give that weird error message that has like 400 characters, and you have to reinstall the app and put the password back. You're like, oh my God, I can't live like this. This is too much to bear. You know, I'm like down on my knees going, why, God, why? Why do I have to put this password back in? But we have to propensity as humans, and I don't know why, but it's just true. Like, we can have amazing things happen and be completely like underwhelmed, and we focus on the negative. Like, if you see this thing right here, like, it's a pretty bad day, isn't it? Like, you're like, all I'm trying to do is watch my Netflix, and this is happening. And that'll ruin your day. And that will make you say, as I say, like, Netflix is crap. It never works, even though it works all the time. And we're also, just for being sort of like realistic about where we are as humans, and especially as Americans in 2017, we're extremely forgetful. Like, I had to explain to my daughter, you know, hey, they used to send you DVDs in the mail, but she didn't know that. She wasn't even born yet or too young to realize. But also, like, even the fact I was watching that commercial that we showed earlier, $17.99, there would be torches and like it would be a complete protest if Netflix went to $17.99 now, right? And that was like $17.99 for them to mail you a DVD. Thank you very much. But that's the way it is. See, I'm an example of that. Like, I was thinking, God, I can't believe I have to do my sermon off a crappy iPhone. There's no way I can. I need an iPad, all right? You can't preach like, I bet the Apostle Paul had an iPad. I'm just saying. But anyway, it's amazing because we forget all of the things that make Netflix, even just Netflix, possible. I mean, think about it. Just take away electricity, take away space travel to put the satellites in place, postal services back when they used to send you a DVD, all of these sort of things that we just take for granted and we forget. Just broadband Wi-Fi would have been wizardry. In fact, I remember people talking about this thing and I'm like, That's never going to work. I always say that about anything that's good. Like, that's never going to work. You'll never have that, you know. Coaxial cable, just television technology. The fact that a television, like a 70-inch TV, is like $14 now. I mean, that's amazing. And we just take it for granted. And so that's why I just wanted to kind of remind you of that, because it's not something we think of. As we talk about this series called Disruptor, as we head into the Easter series, I just want to tell you that I fully understand why you didn't wake up this morning and go, oh my goodness, it's Easter month, Jesus is alive, and I can't wait to get to Action Church and let's talk about it. Dawn's going to, I understand why you don't think that, because it's been thousands and thousands of years. But I want to say to you, and I believe this with all my heart, and I hope this month maybe I can make you sort of at least go, oh, maybe so. Jesus disrupted everything. Just like we wouldn't have even imagined 10 years ago that something like Netflix would come along and change the way we would watch TV. Like, we were certain we knew how to watch television. We were pretty good at it. We did a lot of it. And then Netflix came along, and even though we wouldn't have imagined it or wouldn't have believed it or probably couldn't have even, like, if someone would have told us, we would have said, no, that'll never happen. When it happened, all of a sudden you just go, oh yeah, I don't watch TV. I don't know the last time I watched a show on the network. We don't even do that anymore, and if I do it, I DVR it. So it's like I don't sit down. I don't even know when anything's on, and you probably don't either, because Netflix disrupted the way we watch TV. And I'm here to tell you this morning that Jesus changed everything. There's a reason why. And it's this reason. There's a reason why we're here in 2017 in York, Pennsylvania, and in a converted nightclub going, Jesus is alive, and he has changed everything. But I completely understand why this morning you're not like, yes, I was just thinking that on the way in. I completely understand why you haven't been thinking about it all week at work. Because if you're honest with yourself, like I have to be with myself, we are easily underwhelmed. We generally focus on the negative, and we're very forgetful of what came before us. But what I want to do just over these next few weeks is just sort of push pause and just stop and have a talk with you like I did with Barry. Go, hey, there was a time, and I know you can't imagine this, but there was a time when worshiping God was exclusive, not inclusive. Now, for as many problems as you and I've got plenty of problems with the church, and I've got plenty of problems with Christians, and I've got plenty of problems with this whole Christianity, and I've even got my problems with the Bible going, oh, I don't know, boy, that's difficult. But I want to remind you of something that we don't think of. We don't generally think how inclusive this idea of Christianity is, this idea of worshiping the God of the Bible is, that anyone, anywhere, anytime can worship him, that there was no guard at the door, that we, in fact, we're inviting our friends going, hey, come in, worship God with us. Come see what this is all about. Have a donut. Whatever it takes to get them there, we'll do, because it is, because of Jesus, a totally inclusive thing. And it wasn't always that kind. Now, going back to the beginning, if we could just sort of push pause and sort of remember, even though we weren't alive, there was a time when God, the God who we believe as Christians is the creator of the universe, related to one man, to Adam. That's how it all started. And then it wasn't just Adam, but we find again and again, God would sort of have a relationship with an Adam, with a Noah, with an Abel before he was killed, with Abraham. One man, and yes, I said man, even though we'll talk about Abraham's wife Sarah, God spoke to, but in general, what we find in Scripture is that it was so exclusive that it was not just one person, one man. Can't even imagine that. Like, God would deal with one man on the earth at a time. And eventually that became one family. As Abraham's family grew up, and as they had Isaac, as Sarah and him had Isaac in their old age, and as he had many sons later, like this thing, it grew. Yes, it grew exponentially, but it was still, imagine this, like in all of the earth, we find God coming down and relating and speaking with one family. Like if you were outside of that family, you were not in relationship with God. And then it became one people. Like we take this for granted too. Like we go, oh, well, then things got more broad. Well, yes, they did, but they didn't get broad in the way we think. Imagine like it was all one people, one sort of relatives of Abraham, and like people who would renounce their homeland and renounce their ancestry and sort of join in. The only way you were going to be a follower of God of the Bible, the God who created the earth, was to be part of this one people, the Israelites, the Jews. And beyond that, there was only one place. Like we imagine, like there's a church on every corner in York County, and they're great churches. We are not the only one. We're just the weirdest one. And we're glad you're here. But we don't think for a second like, oh, they're the only place. And we would never say that. In fact, we're always like, hey, we're the dumbest church in America. People get really mad when we say that, but it's true. Trust me, it's true. But here's the thing. There's so many places. We can't even imagine this, but think there was one place that you could contact God. Like one traveling tent when they had the tabernacle with an altar in it. One, before that, it was Abraham and his descendants would have an altar, a family altar. And when you wanted to meet with God, when you wanted to commune with God, there was just one place. It wasn't wherever. In fact, we forget this. We just sort of take it for granted. One of the things that happened when Jesus was on the earth is he met with this woman at the well, and it's a great story, and we don't have time to go over it, but it's a great story of him meeting and talking to a woman that no one else would talk to. She'd had like 5 husbands, and she was living with a guy that wasn't even her husband, so she's a complete outcast, and in that time, like a man wouldn't even speak to a woman, in public like that, but let alone a woman like that. And Jesus just walks up and starts a conversation. But once she realized that this Jesus was probably a prophet or a holy man, it's interesting, like of all the things she could ask him, I want to just read this because we forget like what a big deal this was, this idea that, oh, we can worship God anywhere, because this woman said to Jesus, "Sir, you must be a prophet, so tell me, why is it that you Jews," she's not even a Jew, she's not even inside that group, that people, insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans, now the Samaritans were a different group that were sort of intermarried, partially Jewish, but partially intermarried with other people. So imagine this, like they were considered outside of God's people, even though they were partially Jewish, but they hadn't kept their lines exactly straight. And so Jesus replied, "Believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And the Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. For God is a spirit, so that those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth." This was a big deal. And you and I, we can't even imagine going, oh, well, if I'm not part of that people or I'm not in the right place, I can't worship God. In fact, just being honest, we think it's sort of a burden. Oh, we've got to go worship God on Sunday for an hour. I mean, that seems like a big deal, but you would have to travel. I mean, just imagine traveling to Jerusalem, and I know you're like, well, the world's much larger now, it is, but transportation's so much faster, it's probably about the same. Like you would go days or weeks or, I don't know, a month on a donkey to go worship God. It's just amazing. But if you're following along, like there was one place and one people and there were at least many, many laws. So 10 Commandments we think of because on the mountain God gave Moses 10 Commandments. I think humans are pretty good at creating bureaucracy, so they turned that into 624 and counting number of laws out of the 10 laws, regulations, and think about this, like we think of, oh, I sinned, I need to ask forgiveness. Oh, I sinned, I feel bad, I feel a little guilty. No, if you sinned, then you needed to sacrifice. You needed to sacrifice something. In fact, think about this. When you broke the law, something died. And here's the bad part about it. Not spiders or lawyers. Like, we'd be okay. Like I could probably deal with, or those creepy crawly millipede things. Those things are freaky. Like if I sinned and a millipede died, let the sinning begin. But that's not what happened. Like they sacrificed, this is tough. Okay, you can just say, because that is adorable. And that's not even the cutest thing. I'm with... Okay, we got to see more live goat action. This is a very cute. I think we should have more little animal videos during the sermon. Okay, this is just sad because you would have to, just imagine, you would have to sacrifice a lamb or a goat or a calf or a bull. Now, I know if you were raised on a farm like I was, I still think animals are very cute, but we ate a lot of really cute animals. So I'll just admit that. Like, this is adorable. Let's kill it. So I understand that. Like, if you're, as city folk, we sort of go, I can't imagine sacrificing an animal because they're so cute. But even if you didn't think that, they were an agricultural people, and here's how we know that. Whenever they would sort of go, how wealthy was a person, they didn't tell what their bank balance was, or they didn't go, hey, they had like 3 Lambos and a Ferrari. That's not how they counted it. When you read in this time period about like someone was very wealthy, it was how many sheep, how many goats, how many camels. Like they literally, this was their currency, this was their wealth, their value. So even if you don't think they're cute, which you're just heartless and dead inside because those things are so adorable, but you would have to sacrifice something valuable. I was trying to think like, what would that be? I'm not going to cats or dogs. That's just too mean. What if you had to sacrifice your iPhone? Oh, man, that would be tough, right? Like something you value and you love and you spend so much time with, that'd be different. Like, this is a really bad scene. I'm sorry, you're going to have to sacrifice the iPad and the TV remote. Like, I don't know what it would be, but just imagine, like, when you broke those laws, you would have to travel once a year to a place, and you would have to admit those sins, and you would have to give up something living would have to die, something you valued, something you cared about because of your sin. I mean, that's a little different paradigm. And I know what you're thinking, and I don't blame you. Like, why would anyone worship that God, right? Like, why would anyone take sacrifices to the temple? Why would anyone want to be part of that? That sounds horrible. I know. It's almost as bad as getting DVDs in the mail. It's horrible. It's hard to think of, but we did that. But here's the thing. There was only one God. Talk about exclusive. Not one God, many gods, but one God who actually cared about humanity. And that's not me just being God-centric, Christ-centric, whatever. That's me like looking at the gods of that time, about the Molech and the Asherah and the Baal. We read about Baal all the time in the Old Testament. They didn't claim to care about people. In fact, the sort of worship of all of these gods was these gods are in charge, and we have to find a way to sort of trick them into serving us. If we give them something, if we sacrifice our child to Moloch, then we'll have good crops the next year. And if we don't, he'll be angry and sin. So in every one of these other senses, other than the people of Israel, you can find that people worship many other gods. They created their own gods, whatever. But all of them were based on the idea of these gods are not our friend. And somehow we need to, by our sacrifices, by our actions, by the things we do that please them, we need to sort of trick them into serving us or at least not harming us. And that's not the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible is a God who created, who loved, who had a plan. The 10 Commandments were, this is the way you live. And if you live this way, you will be blessed. And we think blessed by God, but the truth is it's blessed. It's blessed because if you live this way, the whole no murder thing works out pretty well. You know, like all of those things. Don't covet your neighbor's horse, donkey, wife, whatever. Like all of those things work really well, still work very well. And so this was the God who created and loved and cared for and wanted to see human flourishing, which was a very different idea than any other God of that time. Now, here's the thing, and I will fully admit this. We look back and go, that was barbaric. I can't imagine sacrificing animals. I can't imagine going to a place. I can't imagine. And we could spend the morning sort of from the theological viewpoint of going, animals don't actually take away your sin. We get that. Like, God used that as an example of the sacrifice to remind us that something innocent died when we sin. I get that, and that's a great conversation. But just being clear, it had to be difficult, and we just can't imagine. I'll just say that. Like, we are totally, I think, underwhelmed by the church and underwhelmed by Jesus and underwhelmed because that was what came before. But here's the amazing thing. Some guys, some men predicted something different. And we look back and we call them prophets or seers or whatever, but there were men who would look forward, and there's hundreds of examples of this in the writings of the Old Testament, in the Jewish Bible, which is where we sort of grabbed the Old Testament from the Jewish people and said, we'll just put this in our book. It's a collection of books. And it's fascinating to look what they predicted. And it's really fascinating when you imagine, like, they're predicting this in a time when there's one place to worship, one people who could worship, one God with one plan, with 10 laws turned into 624 different regulations, sacrifices, all the things we look back on and can't even imagine. And they said this. I'm going to throw this up on the screen and we'll read this together. Isaiah 53. The prophet Isaiah thinks ahead and predicts this thing, and this is 700 years before Jesus. Now, it's old, but just kind of read along with me. It's pretty amazing if you think about it. It says, who has believed our message? To whom has the Lord revealed his powerful arm? So he's like, this is what God will do. I'm predicting this. He said, my servant grew up in the Lord's presence like a tender green shoot, like a root out of dry ground. There was nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance, nothing to attract us to him. Not like the Bible miniseries where Jesus looks like a Hollister model. I love that, Steve. Thank you for saying that. That is exactly true. Jesus usually either looks like sort of a weird hippie, a guy who drives a mid-'80s Rabbit convertible with pastels on, or a Hollister model. But instead it says he's a guy. We wouldn't have thought anything about just an average guy, a carpenter's son. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with our deepest grief. We turned our backs on him and we looked the other way. He was despised and we did not care. Yet it was our weakness he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his own sins. And then listen to the detail that this prophet, Isaiah, goes into 700 years before Jesus. But he was pierced for our rebellion. Sounds familiar in the story of Easter, where Jesus' side was pierced with a sword and crushed for our sins and beaten so that we could be whole. And he was whipped so that we could be healed. And all of us, they're thinking at this time about a sacrifice of the sheep that they bring to the temple, and they sacrifice, or the tabernacle, and the sheep just comes along dumbly along with them and doesn't know what's going to happen to it. And they're saying, we're like sheep, we've all gone astray. And they knew this because one thing about sheep, they're so adorable and so stupid. And so God's kind of being mean when he calls us sheep, because it's amazing. They will get lost anywhere. That's why they have to have someone in the field called a shepherd. And so he's saying all of us like sheep have strayed away, and we've left God's path to follow our own. Yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all. He was oppressed and treated harshly, yet he never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep is silent before the shears, he did not open his mouth. Looking back on the story of Jesus, the prediction was that he's not going to defend himself, and that's what happened. Unjustly condemned, he was led away. No one cared that he died without descendants, no children, and that his life was cut short in midstream. But he was struck down for the rebellion of my people. And then this idea finishes like this, and I think we should read it. He had done no wrong, and he never deceived anyone. He was buried like a criminal, and he was put in a rich man's grave. That is what happened to Jesus because of the time period, not to spoil Easter for you, but they put him in a rich man's grave that was already prepared. And it was the Lord's good plan to crush him and cause him grief. And yet, when his life was made an offering for sin, he will have many descendants. He will enjoy a long life. And the Lord's good plan will prosper in his hands. And when he sees all that is accomplished by his anguish, he will be satisfied. And because of his experience, my righteous servant will make it possible for many to be counted righteous, for he will bear all their sins. Now, I generally don't read long scriptures because I'm horrible at it. But also, I rarely read Old Testament passages like that, but I just wanted to read you Isaiah 53 like they would have read it. Like someone would have stood up with a scroll and read that off, and everyone would have said, oh, that sounds so great, so different, imagining the sacrifice, because what they were talking about is one sacrifice. Like instead of many sacrifices, instead of like all of us bringing our sacrifices because of our sin, all of us having to gather back here every year, and something has to die because we've broken the law, one sacrifice to, I want to say one ring to rule all rings. That's something completely different. One sacrifice to sort of end all other sacrifices. And not just in Jerusalem. Even though the sacrifice happened in Jerusalem, anywhere. Like we're here in York, Pennsylvania this morning. We're here, North York to be more specific, like here worshiping and as he said, like because of his sacrifice, many will be declared righteous. And if you're here this morning and you're a follower of Christ and you're depending on the sacrifice of Jesus to pay for your sins, you're one of those. Imagine through the years, thousands of people, thousands of different types of people, men, women, all races, all paths, all creeds, anytime. And probably best of all, anyone. And so here's the thing I want to say this morning, that if we just begin at the beginning, the reason why I would say to you this morning that, oh my goodness, you don't even realize how Jesus changed everything. And it's okay, because we're like that. We don't think about it. We just sort of take for granted, oh, I can talk to Jesus anywhere. I can talk to God. I can pray. I can go to church anywhere. Hey, I don't have to travel long distances. Something doesn't have to die every time I break the law. None of those things. We don't think about any of those things. We can't even imagine going, hey, I'm going to talk to my friends about this God I serve, but first of all, I'm going to have to get them, they're going to have to give me their genealogy, because I got to be sure that I can actually talk to them, because they may or may not be eligible for what I'm going to do. I mean, we can't even imagine that. But that's because Jesus changed everything. I want the band to come back up here, but I just want to pray with you, and I just want to start this conversation with this month. Like, isn't it possible that if over the last 10 years we could get really comfortable with Netflix and not really even think it's amazing, in fact, just be sort of annoyed when it doesn't work? Isn't it possible that something that happened thousands of years ago, that's amazing, that actually changes everything? And this is just the start of it. Like next week, we're going to talk about when Jesus actually appeared and how he changed they had no idea what it would be like for the Messiah to come. In fact, they had all the wrong ideas, and we're going to talk about that next week. But isn't it possible that you and I, just as humans, not because we're bad, not because we're just trying to discount what God does, but isn't it possible that we could be very sort of underwhelmed and maybe even focus on the negative, and definitely very forgetful of what Jesus did and what he's doing still? And so I'd like to pray with you, and we'll start there. Dear Jesus, God, we are grateful for the sacrifice of your Son. And I admit this morning, I am not often grateful enough. I'm often underwhelmed. I'm often just looking at the negative of this thing that's come from the death and burial and resurrection of Jesus. And God, I am guilty of being very, very forgetful of what came before us. So God, as a church, as a people, I just pray that you would remind us this week. And I pray that we would just walk out of here at least thinking there's a possibility that we're not nearly grateful or cognizant enough of all you've done for us. And God, we're just going to say thank you. In your name we pray. Amen.